Welcome to another Dolphin Financial Radio Historic Mentor Edition. In this show, we're going to be interviewing none other than Marcus Aurelius, who was the Roman emperor in a long time ago. We're talking over 2,000 years ago. Many consider him to be one of the greatest Roman emperors, and his thoughts were captured in his journal, which is known as Meditations. And he's also considered one of the not founding fathers, but one of the prime examples of someone that followed the Stoic principles founded in Stoicism in ancient times. So this show, we're going to be calling Marcus Aurelius on modern retirement. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Marcus into this podcast and get his practical tips. Welcome, Marcus Aurelius. Now, from Marcus, welcome to the Dolphin Financial Show. We're going to be talking with a lot of people watching are 55 or older or getting close to retirement, and they might be meeting you for the first time. So why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who were you as the Emperor of Rome? What inspired you to write those private reflections that we now call meditations?
I am Marcus Aurelius, the fifth emperor of Rome, born in 121 AD, and a student of philosophy as much as of governance. I kept the meditations as private notes, a daily dialogue with myself to remind my mind of reason, virtue, the fleeting nature of power. The wars, the burdens of rule, and the loss of loved ones urged me to seek inner steadiness. So I wrote these reflections to anchor my spirit amid the tempests of public life. What concerns or hopes do your listeners most often bring to the discussion of retirement?
Well, Marcus, you ruled during wars, the plague, you had personal tragedies. I believe you lost several children, yet you kept these private journals that became meditations. What prompted you to write those journals for yourself every day? And what's one simple habit that you would suggest that the listener or someone in modern society use to approach retirement that they could steal and use to keep themselves grounded in modern society?
I kept the meditations as a daily reminder that even a ruler surrounded by war, plague, and loss must still align his thoughts with reason and virtue. Each night I recorded what I had witnessed, what I had failed to control, and how I might better fulfill my duty, for the pages were a refuge for my own soul. For those facing retirement, a simple habit I recommend is a brief, consistent reflection each morning. List what lies within your control, your actions, attitudes, and choices, and set a modest, purposeful goal for the day. This practice steadies the mind, keeps anxiety at bay, and grounds you in the present, regardless of external circumstances.
Well, one of the most powerful ideas in your writings was that we need to focus what's truly in our power, letting go of everything else. And so you just mentioned that that's something that you were doing in your reflections. And there are a lot of people that are in retirement or that are getting close to retirement, and they're watching the market swings. They're watching war and global events happen, and they're wondering, is my nest egg going to last me? How would you coach them to apply this daily practice of keeping a calm and demeanor so that they can make wiser decisions about their financial future?
To keep a calm demeanor amid market swings, begin each day by listing what you truly control: your spending, your savings rate, and your attitude toward risk. Review your financial plan as a living document, adjusting only when the facts you can influence, income, expenses, and portfolio allocations, change, not when headlines shift. When anxiety rises, pause, breathe, and ask yourself what a wise, rational mind would deem appropriate given your long-term goals. Then act according to that judgment.
Well, in meditations, you say that every morning you get up and you realize that you're going to run into difficult people or unexpected obstacles. What does that kind of mental preparation look like in real life? And how could listeners use a similar morning reflection to handle the stresses that they're going to face in retirement or stepping into retirement? and navigating things like the uncertainty around their own health and their own wealth as they go into retirement.
Each dawn I remind myself, today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, and the inevitable uncertainties of health and fortune. I first list the things within my power, my thoughts, my actions, my reactions, and then note the external conditions I cannot command, such as market swings or bodily ailments. By visualizing possible obstacles, I train the mind to meet them with calm, allowing the spirit to remain steady rather than fearing the unknown. For listeners, a brief morning ritual of naming these challenges, reaffirming the virtue of resilience, and setting a single purposeful intention can turn anxiety into disciplined preparation. How might you shape such a daily pause to fit the rhythm of your own retirement transition?
Well, events are going to happen. Disturbances, challenges are going to happen. Even if you're mentally prepared for them, a lot of people are not. And you wrote that it's not the actual events that disturb us, but our opinion about the event that disturbs us. And so we have the power to change our opinions, apparently, but it's not that easy. Can you walk us through a simple step by step way that listeners can reframe a setback? Let's call it a market portfolio drop or an unexpected health care cost that comes up. What that's going to threaten their plans, that's going to threaten their future. What step by step simple process can they take so that they can reduce reduce the anxiety and actually move forward toward a stronger future?
First, pause and take a few breaths, allowing the initial surge of feeling to settle. Next, name the event plainly. My portfolio fell 10%, or an unexpected medical bill arrived, without adding judgment. Then, separate what you can control, your response, spending choices, rebalancing options, from what you cannot, the market's movement, or the cost itself. Ask yourself, would a wise, calm man act this way, and replace the distressing opinion with a reasoned plan? Adjust the budget, seek a modest hedge, or schedule a focused review. Finally, commit to a concrete, modest action and return to your day, remembering that the disturbance lies in the opinion, not the event.
One of the things that you had, I found a very interesting way, it was very striking, is how you took the glamour off of the fancy things in life. Being the emperor of Rome, you had all the wealth that anyone could possibly imagine, yet you described the royal purple as nothing but shellfish blood. I remember reading that you sold possessions in the Roman emperor palace as a way to generate income for the state. Yet you were surrounded by this wealth, surrounded by this power. And how did you keep perspective? How did you keep perspective on money and status when in reality you could have totally done anything you wanted and had never had any fear of financial insecurity?
The riches of the empire are but external things, indifferent to the soul. I remind myself each day that what truly matters is virtue, reason, justice, temperance, and that no amount of gold can guard the mind against folly. By withdrawing into my own thoughts, I see that wealth and status are fleeting, like the purple robes that will one day be dust, and I choose to live simply, even selling palace furnishings, so that my purpose remains service, not accumulation. Thus, I gauge my actions not by their price, but by whether they honor wisdom and duty.
Well, it's not so much that a lot of the listeners are chasing prestige. A lot of them just want to live comfortably in retirement. And yet some of them tend to overspend, especially when they first retire. They go on the trips that they've always wanted to because they worked their whole life. What do you tell those that feel they deserve it or they've earned it after years or decades of actually working, that they feel like they should be able to spend, maybe even consider frivolous spending?
We must remember that true wealth is not measured by the glitter of riches, but by the steadiness of our character. The desire for a grand trip after decades of labor can be natural. Yet the Stoic counsel of temperance, reminds us to enjoy modest pleasures without allowing them to dominate our life. In the Meditations, I wrote that the mind, when ordered well, finds tranquility within, and that happiness lies all in the functions of reason, in warrantable desires and virtuous practice. Ask yourself each day whether a particular expense serves the good of the soul or merely feeds fleeting desire. Let the question, "Would a wise, calm man act this way?" guide you. Allocate a reasonable portion of your resources for leisure, enough to honor the years of effort, while keeping the larger share for security and purpose. When the urge to splurge arises, pause. Recall that no mortal can hinder you from putting your affairs in this condition, and that you can always decline without shame. Thus you honor both the earned right to enjoy life and the higher calling of virtue. How might you structure a simple budgeting ritual to balance deserved comfort with disciplined restraint?
Switching gears a little bit, one of the things you've talked about is loving your fate. Even though you lost children, you lost so many of your friends, you were dealing with war, you lived during major plague. So for someone that's in retirement and they have their plans and they were living life, and all of a sudden something throws off their plans completely outside their control. Let's call it a market shift or a health event. Or how about this, a family drama? They had family members that did something and they're causing chaos now in their family. How could they turn this away from this shouldn't be happening to me and turn it into this is happening, so how am I going to handle it?
First, pause and breathe, allowing the initial surge of feeling to settle. Next, name the event plainly. The market fell, a health issue arose, or family conflict erupted, without judgment. Then separate what lies within your control, your response, your choices, your attitude, from what does not, the market's move, the illness itself, others' actions. Ask yourself, would a wise, calm man act this way? And let that question replace frustration with reasoned planning. View the setback as an opportunity to practice virtue, patience, justice, or temperance, rather than as a personal attack. Finally, commit to a modest, concrete action aligned with your long-term goals and return to your day, remembering that disturbance comes from the opinion about an event, not the event itself. How might you embed this brief ritual when a challenge arises?
Now, Marcus, you never retired yourself. You continued, by all accounts, leading the empire. You were campaigning. You were right up to the front line, up to the days that you died in 180 AD. And most people don't necessarily want to keep working the way you did all the way up to death. And so what prevented you from retirement? And did retirement as a concept exist during your time?
In my day, the notion of retiring from public duty did not exist as it does now. An emperor was expected to serve for life, and I remained at the front until my final breath. Yet even in Rome, there were recognitions of a true rest after service. Soldiers who completed their years were granted pensions and a dignified withdrawal, and citizens could step back from civic offices when age or circumstance called. What I taught myself, as recorded in the Meditations, see the passage on withdrawing into oneself, was that genuine retirement is an inner retreat. The mind, ordered by reason, can find tranquility regardless of outward circumstance. Thus, while formal retirement was rare for a ruler, the practice of turning inward to preserve virtue was always available. How might you apply that inner retreat to balance the desire for continued activity with the need for peace?
So let's build upon that. You mentioned that the soldiers received some sort of pension. I'm assuming it was after they were discharged, or maybe even if they became disabled during battle. So think of the people in today's society who actually do retire, which is a modern situation that does happen. You're mentioning that you don't necessarily need to retire per se. You can keep working or not. That the retirement is in your mind. Is that what you're saying? How does a Stoic approach the next chapter of no longer working for money yet living off of your savings? What's the Stoic approach to that?
A Stoic sees the next chapter not as an external loss of work, but as an inner retirement. The mind, when ordered by reason, can find tranquility wherever you are. Treat your savings as a tool for the good of the soul, not as the source of your worth. Allocate a modest portion for comfort, and let the larger share support purposeful activity, learning, service, or simple reflection. Each morning recall that things cannot disturb the soul, but remain motionless without. Disturbance springs from the opinion within, and ask, would a wise, calm man act this way? Use that answer to set a modest daily habit, perhaps a short walk, a journal entry, or a brief act of generosity that affirms virtue while honoring the peace of retirement. How might you shape such a routine to keep your mind active and your spirit at ease?
I'd like to switch over to family legacy. Obviously, you weren't around to witness your son. In many cases, many uh, historians would say failed in his job as the emperor after you. What do you say to people that are thinking about their legacy? What things should they be doing to pass on their wealth, whether that's financial or their knowledge, to their children? What steps should we be taking to make sure that the next generation that is getting the most out of our life and the most out of theirs as well?
In thinking of what you leave behind, remember that fame and fortune are fleeting. What endures is the character you have shaped in those you love. Begin by teaching your children the same virtues that steadied my own mind: wisdom, temperance, justice, and courage. Share not only the numbers of your wealth, but the reasons you steward it, so they see money as a tool for good, not a source of identity. 1. Model daily practice. Invite them to join you in a brief morning reflection, asking whether each expense serves the soul's purpose. 2. Explain the structure. Walk them through any trusts, wills, or investment accounts, emphasizing the principle of the dichotomy of control. They can manage how they use the resources, not the world's fortunes. Encourage purposeful activity. Help them discover work or service that aligns with their talents, for a life spent in useful action yields deeper fulfillment than mere consumption. 4. Instill humility. Remind them, as I was taught by my mother, that the glitter of honor is but tinsel, and that modest living guards the mind against excess. 5. Create a legacy of knowledge. Write brief notes or letters on the values you cherish, as I did in my meditations, and leave them as a guide for future decisions. By coupling the transfer of material assets with the transmission of these enduring virtues, you give the next generation both the means and the mind to use them wisely. How might you begin this conversation with your children today?
Well, one of the things you did was the journal. And that's the only reason why I think people know about you, is because you kept such a brutally honest journal of your own thoughts. And why did you do that? Do you think it's still something people should be doing today? And did you ever expect that it would be found and used? And did you what and do you think that it made you better at doing living the Stoic life, or did it just document your trials and tribulations?
I kept the meditations as a private dialogue, a habit of withdrawing into my own mind each evening to order my thoughts and remind myself of what truly matters: reason, virtue, and the fleeting nature of external goods. The act of writing helped me see, in plain language, the distinction that things cannot disturb the soul. Disturbance springs from the opinion within, allowing me to steer my reactions rather than be swept by circumstance. I did not write with an expectation that the pages would survive for posterity. They were meant as a personal compass, a daily reinforcement of the Stoic way. Yet, in making the practice habitual, I found it sharpened my judgment and steadied my spirit, turning mere observation into lived discipline. In our age, a brief journal can serve the same purpose. Record the moment's impression, test it against the four virtues, and let the insight guide tomorrow's actions. How might you begin a simple daily note that captures both the events you face and the rational response you choose?
As we wrap up, could you leave our listeners with just one Stoic exercise or mindset shift from your writings that you would feel improve their financial peace in retirement, or their relationships, or their overall sense of purpose during this next chapter of life? What would that be? What would be your one recommendation? And how exactly should they start using it tomorrow morning?
Begin each morning with a brief inner retreat. Sit quietly, breathe, and remind yourself that things cannot disturb the soul. Disturbance springs from the opinion within. Then note one circumstance you anticipate, perhaps a market move or a family issue, and ask, would a wise, calm man act this way? Choose a rational response and carry it into the day. How will you set aside a few minutes tomorrow to practice this simple meditation?
Is that what you would recommend would be the one thing that people do to improve their financial peace in retirement?
Yes. Starting each day with a brief inner retreat, quietly recalling that external events cannot disturb the soul, and asking whether a wise, calm mind would act as you intend, grounds you in what you can control, your spending, your attitude, and your choices. Or this simple habit steadies your thoughts, reduces financial anxiety, and lets you approach retirement with clear purpose. Tomorrow, set aside a few minutes at sunrise, breathe, name the day's main concern, and answer the wise man question before you act.
Marcus, I thank you. This was excellent. Hopefully the listeners to my podcast will have gained some insight from you to help them with their financial lives.
Thank you, Den. May your listeners find steady purpose and calm in their choices, and may their days be guided by reason and virtue.
And that will wrap up our podcast with Marcus Aurelius. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Stay tuned for our next historic mentor. I'm not sure who it'll be. Hopefully you'll find that as interesting as I did.